Welcome to Surrender School. A couple things that I want to keep in mind. This is a personal journey, not intended to teach you the Enneagram, although you'll pick up quite a bit. It is a side benefit that you pick up quite a bit. The goal is to help you recognize the wonderful person that you are so that you can relax into your true self. And you should be uncovering your true self as you go through this. That's part of the exercise, and that's what happens, where the God of your understanding resides. How we do that is we recognize the unseen forces that drive our behaviors. In Enneagram speak, they're called passions. In recovery speak, they're called defenses or defects. And fixations, right? And the fixations in the Enneagram speak, they're the perceptions or the story that we tell ourselves. We catch ourselves in the act when our ego causes us to act out our persistent defects. And then we gently remind ourselves to return to our true shining self. Okay, some things to keep in mind. I am not an expert on anything, not 12-step, not Enneagram for sure. Recovery is a process, not an event. Self-contempt stops spiritual growth. So if you have moments of self-hatred, work on that. That's what you really want your higher power to help you remove that, because you're human. This is what I say to myself on those moments where I've done something like, oh, I can't believe that I did that, right? Then it's like, you know what? You're human. Those things happen. Do you owe an apology? If so, right? Amend your behavior. Do better next time. Okay. I do want to remind everybody, you get out of this kind of thing what you put into it, but don't beat yourself up. If time or energy or whatever is unavailable to you to really work on this, it's okay. It wasn't meant to be. The reason that I have the 3 books up here, these are the books that I used mostly. Not only these, but these were the ones that I used the most, which is Michael Naylor's Alchemy of the Enneagram for Transforming Addiction, which we're doing a book study with Michael Naylor starting in September, and then the Enneagram for Recovery by Jenner Kay, and then what is sometimes called the Bible of the Enneagram, which is the Wisdom of the Enneagram by Russ Hudson and Don Russo. So those are the 3 books that I use quite a bit as I was pulling the class together. And once again, I want to remind everybody, this class is not to teach you everything about the Enneagram. It really is to whet your appetite and have you understand generally what all the words mean, so that when you're reading something, you don't have to go, now what was passion again? What was that? I've forgotten, right? You actually, they're kind of part of your nomenclature, which means when you're reading these or listening to a YouTube or whatever, that you, and this is what happened to me. When I first started, it's like, I would go, okay, what's passion? So I'm attending a Russ Hudson Sandra Matry thing, right? And they're talking. And they say a word, and then I'm in my head going, what is that? And by the time I've remembered what it is, they've moved on, and I didn't hear what they said. So it's like, so that is really what drove me to want to do this, so that you have the nomenclature, you understand generally how it works, but the deep study you do by reading these other books, not by coming to this, right? Ours is kind of the start of it all. All right. So I'm going to real quick cover what it is I want you to share on, because we're going to do some sharing of aha moments. So here is basically what you worked on this past week. First of all, in the video, I introduced the new titles. Merciful Teacher is the 1, Intuitive Healer is the 2, Inspiring Champion is the 3, Creative Alchemist is the 4, Kind Wizard is the 5, Courageous Pathfinder is the 6, Joyful Visionary is the 7, Lion-Hearted Protector is the 8, and Gentle Mystic is the 9. Now, the reason that I brought those in, and the way that I want you to look at it, right? Although early on, I don't think I said this, and this is at your best, you are this, right? At your best, you are this. So this is almost like in the direction of the gifts of the Spirit, right? Rather than on the direction of the passions, in the direction of the gifts of the Spirit, this is how you show up in the world. And if you are typed correctly, it should jazz you. So that's the first. The second is the weekly challenge. And the weekly challenge was tied to those where it was like you were striving to be, right, like strong or in control or whatever would be the 8, right? Anyway, so the weekly challenge, I'd love to hear if anybody did the weekly challenge. You also watched I think lesson 4 of this Step 1 Science. And the idea there was that the chemicals in your body kind of take over, and then also memorize your mantra. So that is kind of all the assignments were there. And I would love to have people share on any of this that you feel like you learned from. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. We talked a little bit in the session about step one, and I have some kind of ideas on if anybody had difficulty with step one, and I'll want to discuss this here in a second too. Part of the video talked about um, the idea of working as designed, and then I'm going to add the next piece, which is you are not broken. I spent so much of my life believing myself to be broken, and what really resonated with me was the step one science course, where it's like, wait a minute, when I ingest sugar, all these chemicals happening, I'm working as designed. It's the way it's supposed to be, right? This isn't, I'm not broken. That's the way that my body, that's the way everybody's body works. So there's a couple things, a couple suggestions that I have. If you cannot quite view yourself as not broken, because at least for me, it was very, the minute I thought of myself as broken, the physical part especially broken, then it would manifest as either an excuse for bad behavior sometimes, or this kind of, it would morph into this self-hatred that I was not enough, that I was right, that somehow I was flawed, instead of realizing, okay, my body's working as it's designed to work. So a couple of things that I did for step one, um, and that is I changed step one so that it says, instead of admitted we were powerless over the food. I don't know if admitted always meant the same thing, but in today's world, that word admitted means that I have some fault, right? And I would rather acknowledge that I am powerless. So I think try that on. I acknowledge that I am powerless over reality. That's what I acknowledge now completely. I acknowledge that, and the way I say it, because I'm an eight, I say, reality doesn't give a shit what I think about it at all. And I'm comforted by that. It doesn't seem like I should be, but I am. And then the other thing, we are all together at our, and it's not office hours for that, during the reading room, which is Tuesday and Wednesday at 8 a.m. Pacific. We are reading Alan Berger's 12 Insights for Emotional Sobriety. And the shares in that are blowing me away. And then Monday at noon and Thursday at 8 a.m. Pacific, we are doing office hours, where we basically just talk about the different types, talk about the Enneagram stuff, right? All of that. And it's a smaller group. It's sometimes as few as 2 or 3 people, and sometimes as many as 12, but it's always a small group. So if you can make any of those times, that would be great. But I really want to encourage you, even if you read it on your own, even if you want to go out to Surrender School and look at the emotional sobriety workshop that's out there, you will want to do that, because that makes just, it's amazing the difference that it's making in everybody's life, I think. Okay. We acknowledge we were powerless over whatever is your deal, that our lives have become unmanageable. So what I want to share right now is, why is step one difficult for my type? And I want to ask, did this feel true when you saw this on the video and we went over this? Did it feel true, or did it feel false? This will make, when I teach future classes, it'll make it better, because you're going to share whether or not it did. So I'm going to go over this real quick, just so that it kind of refresh everybody's mind. The ones, basically, the difficulty with step one for the type ones is that they need to keep the perfect illusion going, right? And Charlie, that's kind of what you were talking about earlier, right? Okay. For the twos, they seek themselves, their self, in others to be loved, right? And then the thought that they have is, how could someone who is so giving and so loving be an addict? For the three, they seek their self, their sense of self, in others to be admired. Isn't being successful proof that I'm not an addict, right? Isn't that proof of that? For the fours, my need to feel intense emotion prevents me from seeing my powerlessness. Or if they see, sometimes with fours, they'll see their powerlessness and it makes them unbelievably sad. Like, I think that if you're not a four, I don't think you can even comprehend. This is when I talk to friends that are fours, like the sheer, I mean, I think all the rest of us would collapse if we had that level of sorrow, of sadness, of melancholy, of whatever. So fours feel that very strong. And sometimes because of their powerlessness, and sometimes they don't even see the powerlessness. For the five, knowledge is power. If I know enough, I am never powerless. So the answer for fives always seems to be to learn more, right? And one of the ways they learn is to observe. And I don't remember the name, but the person that shared earlier, the five, that went out there and sat right in the middle and talked to people and all that. I mean, that's a wonderful challenge because the mantra for the five, right, is that you get more clarity from really being part of the experience. No, the experience and feelings is where you get your knowledge, right? So I love that. Okay, for the six, my inability to trust prevents surrender. So Sharon, I think, right, for you, maybe trusting the wrong person. Let's see, right? Let's see, is there some way to morph this? And some of the people, by the way, Sandy, I know that you changed your mantra to match the direction that you want to grow, which I think is wonderful. Because the purpose of the mantras, and we're all like unique individuals, is to remind you your path of growth, right? That's what the purpose of the mantras is. Okay, for the seven, it feels like surrender limits my options and it might not be fun. And sevens are always pitching themselves toward options and fun and that kind of stuff. Okay. For the eight, surrender implies that I'm not in charge. And for me, right, it's like if I'm not in charge, who is in charge and are they trustworthy? Are they idiots or are they smart or do they know what's going on? Right. And then for the nine, surrender equals stepping into life. And I'd rather be numb and comfortable. I don't want to step into life. That's what happens with them. And that's what makes step one, because think about it, step one, basically everybody says it is surrender to that. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing again. This is what you would have gotten today. Here, the mantra and the passion and virtue got last week, also the gift of the spirit. And then the title you have, and the striving to feel however by avoiding what. So that is what you would have on your fill-in sheet so far. And if you didn't get that, reach out to me. I'll let you know what it is, but it's on video. You should have that. Okay, so I want to talk real quick about fixations. What this is a new definition. Passion and virtue are heart center. Fixations are head center. So these are the stories that our ego tells us to make our defects, our passions, our defenses, whatever that is, acceptable. There's something in us that knows, I shouldn't have done that. But then we tell that story. Of course, anybody would act like that. Of course, you should do that. Yes, this is this is how you make sure that you show up real or whatever. You tell a story to yourself. So one of the things that I want to talk about, we already did that, are something called adjectives and adverbs. So here's one way for you to know, is this a story I'm telling myself? Years ago, I went to something called Landmark Forum. And Landmark Forum is, I don't even know if they're still around, but anyway, it was a weird weekend where they had me, like you couldn't eat and they kept you there for, 20 hours. It was pretty crazy. But anyway, there were some really cool things from it. But one thing that I distinctly remember, the guy's up front, he has this girl come up and he says, okay, explain to me something. And ended up that her grandfather stabbed her grandmother in front of her, right? She witnessed him kill her grandmother. Okay. So she would say, he brutally murdered my right? And she would add all these adjectives that are basically the words that describe nouns, and adverbs, which are the words that describe, right? And so brutally is an adverb, right? But she kept describing, and it was all these words. And what actually happened is her grandfather stabbed her grandmother, killed her grandmother. Okay, fine. But anyway, but she had all these. And so during this, the guy was like, let's just talk about the facts. And most of us don't know that when we add adjectives and adverbs, is that is how we tell our story. It isn't bad to tell our story that way unless we're telling ourselves that story and we buy into it, right? I mean, you need them obviously when you're writing something, right? When you're writing a story, but this is what I want to say. Watch for adjectives and adverbs when you're talking to yourself. If you're describing this, right? Uh, you know, just watch for that, because that is how you have a pretty good idea if you're adding adjectives to it, right? And you're making it more dramatic, adjectives and adverbs that you want to look for, because if I used to be an English teacher, so if you are using that, there's a pretty good chance that you are telling yourself a story as opposed to what actually is the facts. Okay. The other thing I want to talk about, I mentioned this in passing, I think last time, and I want to kind of tie it in. So the passion and virtue, which we talked about, the passion is where your personality, right? That, and we for so many years believe that is on one end of the continuum, right? On one end is you're living in personality. On the other end, you are living in your true self. And the passion and virtue are the description of the way your heart center reacts to the world. It's heart center stuff, okay? Whereas the head center is the fixations, which I just talked about, right? Those are those stories that we tell ourselves. On the other end of that continuum, which is the head center, the other end of that is a holy idea, which is basically the looking at the world the way that God would have you look at the world. That's the opposite of that. I'm really trying right now to get my head wrapped around the holy idea, because that's the part that still is like, what? Which probably means, I don't know what it means exactly. But I do want to say, for those that have already taken this course, I just want to share that when turned on its side is the levels, right? So the virtue and holy idea, that's really where we want to live, right? In basically 1, 2, and 3, and the levels. If you haven't taken the course last time, you don't know what the levels are, but I wanted to share this with people that had taken that so that you feel comfortable with that. Okay, don't forget office hours, Monday at noon and Thursday at 8 a.m. Office hours are for us to discuss your types and does this tie in, and basically it's like Enneagram stuff. The reading room is for us to read this emotional sobriety book, although I can't help but bring Enneagram stuff in. So I usually have somebody else lead it so that I'm not talking all the time. All right.
Thanks for recovering with us.